The rain fell relentlessly on the city that evening, a fine icy drizzle that seeped between clothing, making each breath heavier and each step more hesitant. The streets, glowing under the neon lights, shimmered like rivers of ink where the luxurious signs and dazzling windows of haute couture stores were reflected. A scent of rain and wet cobblestones hung in the air, mixed with the scent of hot bread and coffee escaping from the brasseries. Crouching under a stone porch, sheltered by a sculpted arch dating from another century, Samuel silently observed the ballet of parasols and expensive coats. Barely 12 years old, but already marked by the harshness of the street, he wore an old hooded sweatshirt too big for him, worn to the thread, and threadbare pants, soaked to the knees. His shoes, sneakers with holes, let the icy water seep through, but he didn't even shiver anymore. His body had gotten used to the bite of the cold. His face, thin and angular, bore the marks of hunger and lack of sleep, but his eyes remained lively, piercing, accustomed to capturing every detail, every movement. He had learned to read the gestures of passers-by, to guess their intentions, to recognize at a glance those who would absent-mindedly toss a coin at him and those who would look away with contempt. In front of him, a few meters away, the starry garden shone like a beacon of opulence. He knew this restaurant well. Not because he had set foot there, of course, but because he had been observing it for months, fascinated by this other world, this forbidden kingdom where men in impeccable suits and women in sparkling dresses laughed around dishes whose smell alone was enough to make him dizzy.
Being the UGB windows, the crystal chandeliers cast a golden light, warming the atmosphere with an almost unreal glow.
Samuel knew that this sumptuous decor hid much more than silver cutlery and expensive bottles of wine. He knew that, behind this gilding, sometimes dramas were played out darker than the alleys where he slept. He had seen rich men come in with smiles and come out enraged, women with shifty eyes rush out of the restaurant, wiping tears from their perfectly made-up cheeks. He had overheard arguments whispered through the thick walls, looks heavy with tension exchanged between those who shared the same table. That evening, as the rain drummed against the zinc roofs, he looked for a place sheltered from the biting wind. He knew his usual corners, the underground parking entrances where the heat from the pipes allowed him to survive the coldest nights, the covered passages where the security guards didn't chase him away too quickly. But something, that evening, caught his attention. A black car with tinted windows glided to the entrance of the restaurant and stopped in hushed silence. A driver got out immediately, opening the rear door with mechanical precision.
A woman, Elise de la Croix, got out of the car.
Samuel recognized her instantly. He had seen this face in the newspapers that passers-by left on benches or in trash cans. Elise Delacroix, the wife of the powerful Victor Delacroix, one of the richest men in the country. A finance and real estate tycoon, a man everyone respected, or feared. Elise was belle, of a cold and perfectly controlled beauty. An elegant figure wrapped in a cream-colored cashmere coat, skillfully styled blonde hair, crimson lipstick that contrasted with the paleness of her complexion. Her heels clicked softly on the pavement as she walked towards the entrance of the restaurant, her Hermès bag clinging tightly to her slender wrist.
Samuel observed every detail.
She walked quickly, too fast. She looked straight ahead, but her fingers clenched on the handle of her bag betrayed barely contained nervousness. She didn't have an umbrella, although it was pouring rain. Something was wrong. Without really knowing why, Samuel sat up slightly, leaning further under the arch to see better through the restaurant window. Inside, the room sparkled with 1,000 lights. Waiters in white jackets moved between the tables with the grace of dancers, carrying beautifully set plates and crystal glasses filled with precious wine. Elise moved forward with a confident step, but Samuel saw beyond appearances. His gaze was searching for someone. Then she stopped at an isolated table, reserved for the most important customers. To be, Victor Delacroix was already installed. The man was imposing, despite his age. A three-piece suit tailored to perfection, graying hair elegantly styled, a face marked by years of power and ruthless decisions. He seemed calm, relaxed, sipping his wine and checking his phone. Elise sat down opposite him. Samuel, motionless, scanned the scene with increased intensity. Then it happened. With a quick and almost imperceptible gesture, Elise reached into her bag and took out one.
Small transparent capsules.
She glanced around furtively, then subtly tilted her wrist over Victor's glass. The liquid clouded slightly before regaining its ruby color. A split second later, she was smiling, as if nothing had happened. Samuel felt his heart racing. He was not naive. He had seen men being beaten for a handful of bills. He had heard whispers of vengeance in dark corners of the city. He knew danger, he knew evil when he saw it. And what he had just observed was not normal. His instincts screamed that he had just witnessed something dangerous. Victor Delacroix was going to drink this drink. He was going to die. The child hesitated. His heart was beating wildly. Each second that passed seemed like an eternity. He could still step back, flee into the shadows and disappear, as he had always done. He was just a nameless kid, a street boy that no one ever looked at. And yet, at this precise moment, he was the only one to see the truth. Samuel clenched his fists. If he did nothing, this man might die before his eyes. His breath was short, but he took a deep breath and, despite his shabby appearance, pushed the restaurant door. As soon as he entered, a wave of heat enveloped him, in stark contrast to the biting cold of the street. The smell of warm bread, melted butter and rich sauces instantly assaulted him, awakening a hunger that twisted his stomach. His stomach cried out for hunger, but he didn't stop. He walked forward, his feet wet on the immaculate floor of the restaurant, ignoring the horrified look some of the customers were giving him. A street child in an establishment of this standing? An anomaly. An intruder. Conversation had briefly paused upon his entrance, before the murmur of contempt resumed. "Someone's going to get him out," a woman said in a pinched tone, her pearl necklace quivering against her neck. "My God, he smells like rain and dirt," whispered another guest, wrinkling his nose. The waiters had seen it too. Two of them already started moving towards him, ready to escort him out. But Samuel quickened the pace. He slipped between the tables, avoided a narrowly pulled chair and arrived in front of Victor Delacroix. The man was about to raise his glass to his lips. Without thinking, Samuel shouted, "Don't drink this. Your wife put poison in it." The restaurant plunged into a silence glacial. Only the rain was still beating against the windows. All eyes turned towards him. The customers, frozen, did not dare to breathe. Even the waiters paused their movements, the trays shaking slightly in their hands. Victor, surprised, slowly lowered his glass. He did not speak yet, but his piercing gaze fixed on the child. Samuel, fought against the dizziness of stress and fear. His body was screaming at him to run, to escape this crazy situation. But he held on. Then, it was Elise who reacted first. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the marble floor. "What nonsense!" she cried, one hand on her chest in indignation. "This dirty child is a liar." Her tone was perfect, controlled, as if she were acting out a scene she had already rehearsed 1,000 times.
A murmur ran through the room. What audacity!
"To accuse a woman like Madame Delacroix," whispered an old man to his wife. "The streets are full of kids ready to invent anything to attract attention." The waiters had regained their senses. Two men in white jackets quickly approached Samuel, ready to grab him by the arms and throw him out. More Victor main cam.
A silent order.
The servers stopped abruptly. The businessman looked at Samuel with almost surgical coldness. He was not one to ignore a warning, however improbable it may be. "Why do you say that?" he asked calmly, his deep voice echoing in the heavy silence of the restaurant. Samuel felt his courage waver under the weight of Victor Delacroix's intense gaze. He knew that if he was wrong, he would be humiliated, rejected, maybe even beaten. But he also knew he was telling the truth. He swallowed, firmed his posture and declared,
"I saw her."
Just before she came in, she poured something into this glass. Elise burst out with forced laughter, a crystalline laugh that rang false in this tense atmosphere. "Do you hear it?" she said, glancing at the surrounding customers, seeking their approval. A street kid who claims to have seen me. Me. It's laughable. Some guests nodded, giggling nervously. But Victor wasn't laughing. His gaze passed slowly from Samuel to his wife. He was a businessman, a man who had built an empire by observing, by analyzing, by understanding what others didn't say. And there, in his wife's eyes, he saw a fleeting shadow. A glimmer of worry, quickly hidden. She was lying. The tension became almost unbearable. Then, with a measured gesture, Victor placed his glass on the table and raised his hand to call for a waiter. Have this wine analyzed. Immediately.
Así verran trougelise.
His smile faltered imperceptibly. Come on, darling, you're not going to take the ramblings of a street urchin seriously, she said, trying to keep her tone light.
I never take anything lightly.
A waiter approached, caught between fear and uncertainty. He carefully picked up the glass and carried it towards the kitchens, where a summary analysis would be quickly carried out.
The silence dragged on.
Samuel felt sweat running down his back, but he kept his head held high. Elise, on the other hand, tensed imperceptibly, crossing and uncrossing her legs, fiddling with the tablecloth with mechanical gestures. Victor, his didn't take his eyes off her. The seconds dragged on, suffocating, while Elise fidgeted in her chair, trying to regain control of the situation. She smiled nervously, adjusting the non-existent folds of her silk dress, seeking support among the guests. But the looks around her had changed. Moments earlier, these same guests saw her as an elegant woman, an untouchable worldly figure. Now they were staring at her with distrust, disgust, and a hint of morbid fascination. The silence was broken by the muffled sound of approaching footsteps. A restaurant employee, with a livid face and an envelope in his hand, walked up to Victor Delacroix. Monsieur Delacroix. His voice trembled slightly. There was definitely a toxic substance in your drink.
As chatter ran through the room.
A woman at a nearby table put a hand to her mouth, stifling a cry. A man whispered something to his wife, but she remained frozen, as if petrified. Everyone then looked at Elise. The blood left his face in a split second. Her lips trembled slightly before she pursed them to hide her confusion. That's absurd. His laughter rang false, breaking in the oppressive silence. Come on, Victor. You're not going to believe this nonsense, are you? But panic was beginning to show in his voice. Victor looked at her with icy coldness. He hadn't moved, but his eyes had transformed into two shards of sharp marble. For what? He finally asked, in a calm voice, but sharp as a cleaver. Elise opened her mouth, then closed it. Victor, it's not what you think, she tried, but her confidence was crumbling. She took one last look at the crowd, searching for support, but no one moved. The guests attended as silent spectators to the fall of a woman who, a few minutes earlier, embodied refinement and power.
Victor stood up slowly.
The slight rustle of his suit echoed strangely loud in the silence of the restaurant. With a fluid gesture, he took a note from his pocket and placed it on the table, a mechanical act, devoid of any emotion. Then he turned his head towards Samuel. The child had not moved. He didn't even dare to breathe anymore.
Victor's gaze met hers.
Samuel expected contempt, perhaps even cold anger, but all he saw was something indecipherable. Finally, the man spoke.
Come with me.
In the black limousine speeding through the city, the silence was as thick as the rain running down the tinted windows. Samuel sat there stiffly, his dirty hands clenched on his overly worn pants, not daring to relax his legs on the luxurious cream leather of the seat.
Everything was unreal.
A few minutes earlier, he was shivering on a porch, invisible to passers-by, a simple street boy of no importance. And now, he was here alongside Victor Delacroix, the man whose life he had just saved. Victor watched the child out of the corner of his eye. He was too thin, his cheeks hollowed by hunger, his face marked by a hardness that only those who had lived in poverty could understand. Finally, he broke the silence.
What's your name?
Samuel hesitated, then cautiously replied, Samuel. Victor nodded slowly, registering that name. Why did you do that?
The child shrugged, looking away.
Because I saw. Simple. Obvious. Samuel expected neither thanks nor rewards. He had did what seemed right, without thinking about the consequences. Victor felt a shiver run up his spine. He saw himself again, decades earlier, a kid from poor neighborhoods, digging through garbage to survive. Few people knew that the powerful billionaire he had become was not born into wealth. A long silence ensued before Victor asked softly,
Are you alone, Samuel?
The child nodded. He had no family, no house. No one was expecting him anywhere. Victor sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. His gaze lingered on the city scrolling behind the glass, the lights of the glass buildings contrasting with the darkness of the alleys. He knew what it meant to be alone in a world where no one cared about you. And he also knew that a simple gesture could change everything. After a moment of reflection, he made a decision. You don't have to sleep outside anymore. From today on, you live with me. Samuel turned his head sharply towards him, his eyes wide with disbelief. What?
You will live with me.
Victor repeated in a calm but firm tone. Samuel frowned, wary. Why would you do that? He had seen adults who promised things and then disappeared.
Victor gave a smile, a tired, almost sad smile. Because you saved my life.
And because I think you deserve better than the street. Samuel opened his mouth, then closed it. He was looking for a trap, but he only saw sincerity in Victor's eyes. He didn't know what to say. No one had ever wanted him. But that evening, everything changed. During this time, at the restaurant, chaos gave way to justice. The police had arrived urgently. Elise, still in shock from her own failure, didn't even try to run away this time. The evidence was overwhelming. The restaurant's surveillance cameras had recorded his gesture. The capsule slipped discreetly into the wine. Analysis of the contents of the glass confirmed that it was a powerful poison, difficult to detect, but effective enough to kill a man in minutes. And it didn't take long for investigators to discover the rest of his plan. She planned to eliminate Victor, to inherit his empire, and flee with her secret lover, a younger man hungry for riches. But she hadn't planned just a simple street boy, invisible to the eyes of the powerful, would come ruin his plan. His arrest made headlines. Billionaire's wife arrested for attempted assassination. The media went wild, turning his story into a national scandal. Victor did not seek revenge. He never spoke of her, as if she had never existed. The limousine stopped in front an immense residence nestled on the heights of the city, a domain that Samuel would not have even dared to dream of. The wrought iron gates opened silently, letting the car enter a driveway lined with century-old oaks and illuminated fountains. When the car stopped, Samuel hesitated. "Is this where you live?" he asked, impressed. Victor nodded. "This is where you live now too." Samuel swallowed hard. All of this. He didn't know how to accept it. But getting out of the car, he knew he would never be alone again. And that evening, falling asleep for the first time in a soft bed, he realized that sometimes it only takes a single moment of courage to change a life. Hers had just been transformed forever.